The Grand Hall of was filled with beings from across the galaxy. 12 species had sent their representatives to this massive space station that floated in neutral space. The hall itself was built to make everyone feel small. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. Light came from thousands of crystals embedded in the walls, casting soft blue and gold shadows across the gathered delegates. Commander walked slowly through the crowd. His scales were dark green, almost black in the dim light. He stood taller than most beings in the room, his powerful frame marking him as a warrior of the people. But today he wore no armor. Today he wore the simple gray robes of a veteran who had seen enough war. 5 years had passed since the Void War ended. 5 years since the Harvester Collective was finally defeated. The galaxy was still healing from wounds that ran deep, and this summit was meant to discuss the future. How would the different species work together? How would they rebuild what was lost? Did not care much for politics. He came because Ambassador had asked him to come. The old had served alongside during the war, and when asked for something, listened. The commander found a quiet corner and watched the delegates talk among themselves. He saw them with their silver skin and 4 arms. He saw the tall and thin like walking trees. He saw their bodies covered in soft fur the color of autumn leaves, and he saw the humans. There were only 3 human representatives in the hall. They stood together near the center, talking with a group of traders, studied them carefully. 2 men and 1 woman, all dressed in simple dark uniforms. They looked so fragile compared to the other species. No claws, no thick skin, no natural weapons of any kind. A young delegate approached the human group. Could not hear what was said, but he saw the gesture dismissively with all 4 arms. The humans remained calm, their faces showing nothing, but had spent enough time around humans to know they were angry. He could see it in the way they held their shoulders. Ambassador appeared beside. The old moved quietly for someone his size. "Trouble brewing," said in a low voice. "The young ones always think they know everything," replied. "That delegate has been speaking against human membership in the Alliance. He believes they are too weak, too short-lived, too primitive to deserve a voice in galactic matters." Made a sound deep in his throat. It was not quite a laugh. "Primitive. Would you speak to the assembly? Tell them what you witnessed during the war." Turned to look at the ambassador. "You want me to defend the humans. I want you to tell the truth, nothing more." The commander was silent for a long moment. Memories moved behind his eyes like shadows. Finally, he nodded once. Led him toward the center of the hall where a raised platform served as the speaking area. The ambassador called for attention, and slowly the hall grew quiet. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the 2. "Many of you know Commander," said, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "He commanded the 7th Combined Battalion during the Void War. He fought alongside soldiers from 9 different species, including humans. I have asked him to share his experiences." The young delegate stepped forward. His silver skin caught the light as he moved. "With respect, Ambassador, what can one soldier tell us that we do not already know? The war is history. We are here to discuss the future." "The future is built on the bones of the past," said. His voice was rough from years of shouting orders across battlefields. "And you understand nothing about the past if you think humans are weak." A murmur ran through the crowd. Thus 4 arms crossed over his chest. "They live barely 100 years. They have no natural armor, no enhanced senses, no biological advantages. They conquered their own planet through sheer accident. How can such a species deserve equal standing with races that have sailed the stars for?" Stepped onto the platform. He looked out at the gathered delegates, taking his time. When he spoke again, his voice was calm but heavy with something none of them could name. "I have killed enemies from 17 different species. I have fought in battles that turned moons into rubble. I have watched stars die and worlds burn. In all my years of war, across all the species I have encountered, I have never been more frightened than when I fought beside humans." The hall went completely silent. "You call them weak because they die easily. You call them primitive because they have no claws. But you have never seen what a human becomes when they decide something matters more than their own survival. You have never watched them do things that make no sense, take risks that no sane creature would take, sacrifice everything for reasons that other species cannot understand." Paused. His eyes found the three human representatives in the crowd. They were watching him with expressions he could not read. "I will tell you what I witnessed. I will tell you about the humans I fought beside during the darkest days of the Void War. And when I am finished, you will understand why I believe humans are the most terrifying species in this galaxy." He took a breath and began. "It started on a frozen world called 4. The temperature was cold enough to kill in minutes without thermal protection. We were trapped there with a small unit of human soldiers. Their leader was a woman named Captain Park. She was 38 years old, small even by human standards, and she had eyes that looked like they had seen too much death." The delegates leaned forward, drawn in despite themselves. "Our supplies ran out on the third day. The cold killed 4 of my soldiers. Their blood turned to ice before it could even spill from their wounds. We should have all died. The humans should have died first. Their bodies are not built for such cold." Shook his head slowly. "But they did not die. They kept moving. They kept fighting. And on the 4th day, I watched Captain Park do something that changed everything I believed about survival." He looked at the delegate. "She gave her thermal suit to one of my dying soldiers. She took it off her own body and wrapped it around him. Do you understand what that means? She chose to expose herself to killing cold so that she had known for 3 days might live a few hours longer." "That is insanity," they said. "Yes," agreed. "It is. And she survived for 6 more hours without protection. 6 hours in cold that should have killed her in 30 minutes. She survived through nothing but the force of her own will because she refused to die before her people were safe." The commander stepped to the edge of the platform. "That was my first lesson about humans. They do not calculate survival the way we do. They do not weigh their own lives against others using logic and probability. When they decide something matters, they will burn themselves to ash to protect it." He looked out at the assembly. "And that was only the beginning. Let me tell you about Sergeant and what he did to save us all." Let the silence in the hall stretch for a moment before he continued. The delegates watched him with a mixture of curiosity and doubt. Some clearly thought he was exaggerating. They would learn. "Sergeant was 29 years old when I met him," said. "He was what humans call a demolitions expert. He knew how to destroy things. Bridges, buildings, enemy vehicles. If it could be broken, he knew exactly where to place the charges to make it happen. But that was not what made him dangerous." The commander began to pace slowly across the platform. His clawed feet made soft clicking sounds against the polished floor. "By the 5th day on 4, we had lost contact with Alliance Command. The Harvester forces had jammed our long-range communications. They were closing in on our position from 3 sides. We had 47 soldiers left, 18 including myself, 23 humans, 6 scouts. Our ammunition was running low. Our food was gone. The cold was killing us faster than the enemy." A delegate raised one thin arm. "Why did you not retreat?" "Retreat to where?" "The Harvesters controlled the only landing zone within 500 kilometers. Any ship that tried to reach us would be shot down before it got close. We were trapped in a mountain base that was slowly becoming our tomb." "Stop packing and face the assembly." Captain Park called a meeting of all surviving officers. I was there. So was Sergeant. The captain laid out our situation clearly. We could stay and die slowly, or we could try something desperate. There was an Alliance relay station 60 kilometers east. If someone could reach it and send a signal, they could call in an orbital strike on the Harvester anti-air positions. That would open a window for evacuation ships to reach us. The problem was the path to the relay station. It went directly through harvester-controlled territory. The young delegate spoke up. Surely you sent a team, safety in numbers. A team would be spotted immediately. The harvesters had sensors everywhere. One person, moving fast and quiet, might have a chance. Captain Park ran the calculations. She said the probability of success was 17%. Let that number hang in the air. 17%. That means more than 8 out of 10 times whoever went would die for nothing. No rational being would accept those odds for a suicide mission. The scouts refused. My own soldiers refused. I considered going myself, but Captain Park told me the cold would kill me before I got halfway. And then Sergeant stood up. The commander's voice grew quieter, forcing the delegates to lean in. He did not ask for time to think. He did not request better odds. He simply said, "I will go." Captain Park tried to talk him out of it. She told him the numbers, told him he would probably die. Do you know what he said? No one answered. He said, 17% is not zero. Someone has to try. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd, waited for quiet before continuing. I watched him prepare. He took only what he needed, a sidearm with 2 magazines, emergency rations for one day, a compact transmitter. He left his heavy weapons behind because they would slow him down. Before he walked out into the killing cold, Captain Park grabbed his arm. She told him to come back alive. He smiled at her and said he would do his best. Then he was gone, out into the frozen darkness with nothing but his own 2 legs and a mission that would probably kill him. The delegate shook his head. This is foolishness, not bravery. Any species can produce individuals willing to throw their lives away. You still do not understand, said. Let me tell you what happened next. He began packing again, his movements carrying the tension of memory. We waited. Hours passed. The harvesters attacked our position twice, and we barely held them off. More soldiers died. The cold crept deeper into the base as our power generators failed one by one. I watched a human private hold the hand of a dying scout and tell her stories about a place called a city by the sea where it was always warm. The died with a smile on her face. 20 hours after Sergeant left, our communications crackled to life. His voice came through, broken by static but clear enough. He had reached the relay station. He had sent the signal. Alliance ships were incoming. But then he said something that made my blood freeze colder than the ice outside. Stopped in the center of the platform. He told us to stay inside the base. He told us not to come out until the ships landed. When Captain Park asked why, he said the harvesters had tracked his signal. They were sending a bombing run to destroy the relay station, and they would arrive before our ships. She ordered him to run. She screamed at him to find cover, to hide, to do anything to survive. Do you know what Sergeant did? The hall was utterly silent. He transmitted false coordinates. He sent a signal that made the harvesters think he was 5 kilometers away from his actual position. They redirected their bombers to that location. It bought our evacuation ships the time they needed to land. But the harvesters realized the deception quickly. They sent a second wave to the real coordinates. The last thing we heard from Sergeant was him saying goodbye. Then the line went dead. Looked at the human representatives. They stood perfectly still, their faces unreadable. We evacuated. All 47 survivors made it onto the ships. As we lifted off, I looked down at the surface. I saw the explosions where the relay station had been. The harvesters had turned that entire area into a crater of melted rock and ash. I thought Sergeant was dead. Everyone thought he was dead. We held a memorial service on the carrier ship. Captain Park spoke about him. She did not cry, but her voice broke twice. The commander paused. 3 days later, a rescue team searching the area found a collapsed tunnel system beneath the relay station. Inside that tunnel, wrapped in emergency thermal blankets and surviving on melted ice, was Sergeant. Gasps echoed through the hall. He had predicted the harvesters would bomb the surface first and search later. Before the attack came, he found an old mining tunnel and sealed himself inside. He waited in complete darkness for 3 days, injured and alone, betting his life on the hope that someone would eventually come looking. Turned to face the delegate directly. "You asked earlier if humans are insane. I asked Sergeant the same question after he recovered. I asked him how he could accept 17% odds, how he could sacrifice himself for people he had only known for 5 days, how he could survive something that should have killed him." "What did he say?" they asked, his voice smaller than before. "He said he was terrified. He said every step through the frozen wasteland he wanted to turn back. He said when the bombs started falling, he screamed in that tunnel like a frightened child. He felt fear like any of us would feel fear." Stepped closer to the young delegate. "But then he told me the difference. He said fear is just a feeling. It tells you that something matters. And when something matters enough, you do not let fear stop you. You let it guide you." The commander looked out at the assembly. "Humans feel everything we feel. They know when the odds are against them. They know when death is likely. But they choose to act anyway, not because they are too stupid to understand the danger, because they have decided that some things are worth dying for." He returned to the center of the platform. "The Siege of 4 taught me that humans are dangerous. But what happened at Medical Station 7 taught me that humans are something far worse. Let me tell you about Lieutenant and the night she held back death with her bare hands." The delegates shifted in their seats. Some whispered to each other. The story of Sergeant had clearly affected them, but could see that many still held onto their doubts. One story could be an exception. One brave soldier did not represent an entire species. He would give them more. "Before I tell you about the medical station, I must finish the story of our escape from 4, said. "Because what happened in orbit above that frozen world showed me another truth about humans." The commander clasped his hands behind his back, a habit from his years of military service. Our evacuation ships broke through the atmosphere and climbed toward the Alliance fleet waiting in high orbit. For a few minutes, we thought we were safe. The soldiers around me began to relax. Some even smiled. We had survived the impossible. Then the Harvester fleet appeared. A heavy silence fell over the hall. Everyone knew about the Harvesters. Everyone had lost someone to them. 12 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly between us and the Alliance fleet. Their weapons were already charging. Our evacuation transports had no weapons, no shields worth mentioning. We were cargo ships filled with wounded soldiers, and we were about to be destroyed. Walked to the edge of the platform, his eyes distant with memory. The Alliance fleet moved to intercept, but they were too far away. The math was simple. The Harvesters would reach us first. We had perhaps 10 minutes to live. Captain Park was on the bridge of our transport. I was there with her, along with 2 other officers. She studied the tactical display for a long moment, then she did something I did not expect. She opened a channel to every human soldier on all 3 transports. The commander paused. She told them the situation. No lies, no false hope. She said the Harvesters would intercept us in 9 minutes. She said the Alliance fleet would arrive in 14. She said she needed volunteers for something dangerous. Within 30 seconds, every human soldier capable of standing had reported to their transport's hangar bays. A delegate raised a furred hand. "What could they possibly do? You said the transports had no weapons." "The transports had no weapons," agreed. "But they had maintenance pods, small craft used for repairs on the outer hull. Each pod had basic maneuvering thrusters and a cutting laser meant for welding." Understanding began to dawn on some faces in the crowd. Captain Park's plan was insane. She wanted to launch the maintenance pods directly at the harvester fleet. Each pod would carry one soldier armed with explosives. They would fly into the harvester formation and detonate their charges against the enemy hulls. It was not a battle plan. It was a suicide attack. And humans volunteered for this, the delegate asked. His voice had lost its mocking tone. They did not just volunteer. They argued over who would get to go. There were only 18 pods across all three transports, and more than 60 humans wanted a seat. Captain Park had to choose who would live and who would die. Turned to face the assembly fully. She chose based on skill and experience, the best pilots, the best soldiers. Sargent was not among them. He had not yet been rescued from the planet's surface, but his younger sister was. Private Sara was 25 years old. She had been a transport pilot before the war. She had never fired a weapon in combat. When Captain Park called her name, she simply nodded and walked to her pod without a word. I followed her. I do not know why. Perhaps I needed to understand. I found her in the hangar bay, strapping herself into a pod barely large enough for a human body. She was attaching explosive charges to the hull with steady hands. I asked her if she was afraid. The commander's voice grew soft. She looked at me with those strange human eyes and said yes, she was terrified. She said she had never been more scared in her life. Then she smiled and told me that her brother always said fear was just a feeling. She said if could walk into the frozen dark with 17% odds, she could fly into a harvester fleet with 0% odds. I told her there was no chance of survival. The pods had no shields, no armor. Even if she reached a harvester ship, the explosion would kill her. She said she knew. Then she asked me to tell her brother she loved him if I ever saw him again. Fell silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. The pods launched, 18 tiny craft against 12 warships. I watched from the bridge as they scattered across the black void like seeds thrown into a storm. The harvesters saw them coming. Their point defense weapons began firing. Pods exploded. Soldiers died. But humans are unpredictable. They did not fly in formation. They did not follow logical attack patterns. Each pilot chose their own path, weaving and spinning in ways that made them hard to track. 7 pods were destroyed in the first minute, but 11 kept going. Private Sara flew her pod directly into the engine section of a harvester cruiser. The explosion tore through the ship's power core. Secondary explosions followed. The cruiser broke apart, its burning pieces crashing into a destroyer beside it. In total, the 18 humans destroyed 4 harvester ships and damaged 3 more. The enemy fleet fell into disarray. Their formation broke, and in that chaos, the Alliance fleet arrived. The commander straightened his back. We survived because 18 humans chose to die. They flew into certain death with fear in their hearts and fire in their hands, and they never hesitated. Not one of them tried to turn back. Not one of them begged for another option. He looked at the human representatives. One of them, an older man with gray hair, had closed his eyes, wondered if he had known any of the 18. The Battle of Burning Stars, we called it afterward, named for the way the harvester ships lit up the void when they died. It was not a victory won by superior firepower or better strategy. It was won by humans who decided that their lives were less important than the lives they were protecting. The delegate stepped forward slowly. His silver skin had paled. "How do you make sense of it?" he asked. "How do you understand a species that throws away their existence so easily?" "That is exactly the wrong question," said. "Humans do not throw away their lives easily. Every one of those 18 soldiers wanted to live. Private Sara wanted to see her brother again. She wanted to go home to their family. She wanted a future. But she wanted something else more. She wanted the soldiers on those transports to survive. She wanted her sacrifice to mean something. And when she weighed her own life against the lives of others, she made a choice that most species cannot even comprehend. pointed at the assembly. That is what makes humans terrifying. They do not lack the instinct for self-preservation. They have it as strongly as any of us, but they can override it. They can look at certain death and walk toward it anyway, because something in their hearts tells them it is the right thing to do. He stepped back toward the center of the platform. I told you that 4 taught me humans are dangerous. The Battle of Burning Stars taught me they are unpredictable, but the medical station incident taught me the most important lesson of all. It taught me that human courage is not limited to soldiers. It is not something trained into them by military discipline. It lives in every human, waiting to emerge when the moment demands it. Let me tell you about Lieutenant. She was not a warrior. She was a healer, and she committed the most terrifying act of courage I have ever witnessed. The grand hall had grown warm with the press of bodies and the weight of stories. Delegates who had been standing moved to find seats. Those who had seats leaned forward as if pulled by invisible threads. Commander noticed that even the guards along the walls were listening. Medical Station 7 was a neutral facility, he began. Under galactic law, it was protected territory. No weapons were allowed on board. No soldiers, no military equipment. It existed only to heal the wounded, regardless of which side they fought on. The commander's voice carried a bitter edge. The harvesters did not care about galactic law. They never did. To them, the station was not a hospital. It was a collection point for genetic material. Wounded soldiers from a dozen species, all gathered in one place, unable to fight back. It was a harvest waiting to happen. A shudder ran through the crowd. Everyone knew what the harvesters did with genetic material. Everyone knew about the experiments. Lieutenant arrived at 7 months before the attack. She was a field medic who had requested transfer to the station after watching too many soldiers die in her arms. She told her commanding officer that she needed to save lives instead of just watching them end. She wanted to make a difference. Paused. She was 31 years old. She had trained as a nurse before the war, then volunteered for military medical service when the harvesters attacked her. She had no combat training. She had never held a weapon. Her entire purpose was to heal. When the harvesters breached the station, there were 400 patients on board, wounded soldiers from 9 different species. Among them were 12 younglings, children. They had been evacuated from a colony ship that the harvesters had attacked. All of them had injuries. None of them could walk. The commander's hands tightened into fists at his sides. The station's emergency protocols were activated when the harvesters cut through the outer hull. Blast doors sealed. Internal communications went down. The few security personnel on board tried to mount a defense, but they were overwhelmed in minutes. The harvesters moved through the station deck by deck, taking patients from their beds. Lieutenant was in Ward 7 when the attack began. Ward 7 was in the far corner of the station. It held 42 patients, including the 12 children. When the blast doors sealed, Ward 7 became isolated from the rest of the station. Looked at the delegates in the crowd. Some of them had closed their eyes. For 2 hours, nothing happened. The people in Ward 7 could hear distant sounds, screams, weapons fire, the heavy footsteps of harvester soldiers moving through corridors. Lieutenant gathered all the patients who could move into the center of the ward. She put the children in the middle, surrounded by adults. Then she waited. When the harvesters finally reached Ward 7, they found the blast door locked from inside. Standard protocol was to cut through. Their plasma torches could slice through station metal in minutes, but Lieutenant had been busy during those 2 hours of waiting. The commander almost smiled. She had taken apart every piece of medical equipment in the ward, diagnostic machines, surgical tools, monitoring stations. She used the components to reinforce the blast door. She welded metal plates over the seams. She created a barricade using beds and supply cabinets. The harvesters cut through the first layer and found another layer behind it. They cut through that and found another. Each layer cost them time. Each layer was built by a single human woman with no engineering training, working with nothing but medical equipment and desperate determination. A delegate spoke up. How long could such barriers hold? They held for 9 hours. Silence. 9 hours of cutting and burning and pounding on that door. 9 hours of Lieutenant standing behind her barricade, listening to monsters try to break through. 9 hours of children crying and wounded soldiers praying, and a single human woman refusing to let death enter her ward. Began packing again, his movements carrying the tension of the story. When the harvesters finally breached the last barrier, they found Lieutenant waiting for them. She had converted a surgical laser into a weapon. It was not designed for combat. It could barely burn through skin. But she stood in that doorway and pointed it at the first harvester soldier who tried to enter. She told them that no one in her ward would be taken. She said they would have to kill her first. And even then, she said, her patients would fight. She would make sure that taking Ward 7 cost them more than it was worth. The commander stopped packing. The lead harvester was twice her size. It could have killed her with a single blow, but it hesitated. Do you understand why? No one answered. Because humans are unpredictable. Because the harvesters had already encountered human soldiers who did impossible things. This small female with her makeshift weapon and her broken bones was clearly no threat, but she stood there like she believed she could win, and that made the harvesters uncertain. That hesitation lasted just long enough. Alliance Marines breached the station from the opposite side. Fighting spread through the corridors. The harvesters at Ward 7 received orders to withdraw and regroup. They left without taking a single patient. Turned to face the assembly. When the Marines reached Ward 7, they found Lieutenant still standing in that doorway. She had 3 broken ribs from when a piece of the blast door struck her during the cutting. Her left arm was fractured in 2 places from building the barricades. She had not slept in over 20 hours. She had not eaten in longer than that. But she was still standing, still holding that surgical laser, still guarding her patients. The commander's voice dropped low. The Marine captain tried to take the weapon from her hands. She would not let go. She kept saying that she had to protect the children. He had to show her his identification 3 times before she believed he was really Alliance. Only then did she let herself collapse. Later, when she woke up in a hospital bed, the first thing she did was ask about her patients. Not about herself, not about the battle. She asked if everyone in Ward 7 had survived. Looked at the delegate. The young diplomat had not spoken in a long time. You asked earlier if all humans are like this. Let me answer that question now. No, most humans live their entire lives without ever facing a moment like the one Lieutenant faced. They work ordinary jobs. They raise families. They grow old and die peacefully, never knowing what they are capable of. But here is what I learned at 7. Any human can become what Lieutenant became. It is not about training or strength or military experience. It is about something inside them that awakens when innocent lives are threatened. The commander stepped to the very edge of the platform. A nurse, a healer, a woman who had never hurt another being in her life. She stood against monsters with nothing but broken equipment and her own will, and she did not let them pass. Not because she was a warrior, because she was human. That is what you do not understand about this species. Their potential for courage is not limited to certain individuals. It lives in all of them, in their soldiers and their healers and their farmers and their children. Any human at any moment can decide that something matters more than their fear. He let the words hang in the air. I have one more story to tell. The last story. The one that still visits me in my dreams. It is about a young soldier named Private Minu and the day he held a mountain pass against 3,000 enemies. Looked out at the assembly. And when I am finished, You will understand why I bow my head to no species in this galaxy except humans." Commander stood in the center of the platform and said nothing for a long moment. The delegates waited. Even those who had seemed skeptical at the beginning were now completely silent, hanging on his words. "The final stand at Prime," said quietly. "That was the battle that ended the Void War. You have all heard the official histories. You know that the Alliance fleet destroyed the Harvester. You know that their command structure collapsed and their forces scattered across the galaxy. What you do not know is what happened on the surface of Prime in the hours before that final victory." The commander's voice carried a weight that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. The Alliance had landed ground forces to secure key positions, while the fleet engaged the Harvester Armada in orbit. One of those positions was a mountain pass called the Valley. It was the only route between the Harvester's main ground base and the Alliance command center. If the Harvesters broke through, they could destroy our leadership and turn the battle in their favor. The unit assigned to hold Valley was the 82nd Combined Infantry. 60 soldiers, 20 humans, 25, 15. They were told to hold the pass for 6 hours until reinforcements could arrive. Paused. The Harvesters sent 3,000 soldiers to break through. A ripple of whispers went through the crowd. 3,000 against 60. The numbers were impossible. Private Minu was 24 years old. He had been a soldier for 8 months. Before the war, he had been a student studying music at a university in a city called Seoul. He played an instrument called the piano. He had joined the military because his older brother had been killed in a Harvester attack, and he wanted to do something that mattered. I did not know him well. We had spoken perhaps 3 times in the weeks before Prime. He was quiet. He smiled often. He shared his food with anyone who was hungry. The other soldiers in his unit called him Little Bear because of the way he walked. The commander's hands trembled slightly at his sides. The battle for Valley began at dawn. The Harvesters came in waves. The first wave was 500 soldiers. They crashed against our defensive line like water against stone. We held. 30 of our soldiers died, but we held. The second wave came an hour later. 800 soldiers this time. The fighting was brutal, hand to hand in places. When it was over, only 31 of us remained standing. The valley floor was covered in bodies. Then the third wave appeared on the horizon. 1,700 harvesters, all of them fresh, all of them hungry for blood. Closed his eyes briefly. Our commanding officer gave the order to retreat. There was no shame in it. We had held for 4 hours. We had done everything that could be asked of us. The pass would fall, but at least some of us would survive to fight another day. Everyone began falling back. I was helping a wounded scout move toward the extraction point. Private Minu was beside me, providing cover fire. Then his radio crackled with a message from the command center. Reinforcements had been delayed. They would not arrive for another 2 hours. If the harvesters broke through now, they would reach the command center before anyone could stop them. The entire battle, the entire war, could be lost. The commander opened his eyes. Private Minu stopped walking. He looked at me with those soft human eyes, and I saw something change in them, something settle. He handed his spare ammunition to the soldier beside him and said he was staying. I told him he was insane. I told him one soldier could not hold a pass against 1,700 enemies. I told him he would die for nothing. He smiled at me, that same gentle smile I had seen him give to hungry soldiers when he shared his food. He said someone had to buy time. He said 2 hours was a long time, but he would try. His voice cracked. He said he hoped it would be enough. Then he turned and walked back toward the defensive line. Alone. One human with a rifle and 2 ammunition crates against an army. I watched him go, and I did not stop him. I have asked myself every day since then why I did not stop him. The commander took a shaky breath. Private Minu held the valley for 4 hours. 4 hours. Not two, four. Alone against 1,700 harvesters, he held that line. Gasps filled the hall. "How is that possible?" the delegate whispered. "He used the terrain. He used the bodies of the fallen for cover. He moved constantly, firing from different positions, making it seem like there were more defenders than just one frightened young man with a broken radio. He used every trick, every piece of knowledge, every ounce of strength in his small human body." The harvesters could not understand what was happening. Their scouts reported multiple defenders. Their commanders argued about tactics. They slowed their advance, expecting a trap, and all the while one soldier held them back. Wiped at his eyes, he did not hide the tears. When the reinforcements finally arrived, they found Private Menu still firing, still fighting. The valley around him was filled with harvester dead, hundreds of them. He was bleeding from wounds on his arms and legs. His armor was shattered, but he was still standing, still holding the line. A medic reached him 30 seconds after the reinforcements secured the pass. Private Menu looked at her and asked a single question. He asked if everyone got out safely. She told him yes. The command center was secure. The battle was won. The commander's voice broke completely. He smiled, that same gentle smile, and then he died. Silence, complete and absolute silence, filled the grand hall of. Stood still for a long moment, composing himself. When he spoke again, his voice was steady but heavy with emotion. Private Menu was 24 years old. He liked music and sharing food and making people smile. He was not special. He was not a legendary warrior or a genetic miracle or anything that your scientists could explain. He was just a human, an ordinary human who decided that some things mattered more than his own life. The commander looked out at the assembly. "You came here today asking whether humans deserve a place at the galactic table. You called them weak, short-lived, primitive. You measured them by their claws and their armor and you found them lacking. But you measured the wrong things." Stepped forward, his presence filling the platform. "Humans are not strong because of their bodies. They are strong because of what lives inside them. They carry something that most species in this galaxy have forgotten. They carry love, not as a weakness, not as a soft emotion for quiet times. They carry love as a weapon, as a fire that burns brighter than any fear." Captain Park gave her thermal suit to a dying alien because she loved the idea that no one should die alone. Sergeant walked into frozen death because he loved his unit. Private Sora flew into a harvester fleet because she loved her brother and everyone he was trying to save. Lieutenant stood against monsters because she loved children she had never met before. Private Menu held a mountain pass because he loved a future he would never see. That is why humans are terrifying, not because they are strong, because they love. And there is nothing in this universe more dangerous than what a human will do to protect what they love. The commander bowed his head. I have fought in more battles than I can count. I have killed enemies without mercy. I am a warrior born and bred. And I tell you now, before this assembly, that I would rather face a fleet of harvester warships than stand against a single human who has found something worth dying for." He looked up at the young delegate. "You asked if they deserve a place at the table. I say they deserve to lead the table. I say any species that can produce beings like the ones I have described has earned the respect of every civilization in this galaxy." Stepped down from the platform. The assembly remained silent. Later, after the formal session had ended, the delegate approached in a quiet corner of the hall. The young alien's silver skin was pale, and his 4 arms hung loosely at his sides. "Were the stories true?" he asked. "All of them?" Did not answer immediately. Instead, he pulled aside his robe to reveal a scar on his chest. It was old and faded, but clearly visible against his dark scales. "A human gave me this wound," he said. "Private Menu, during the retreat from Valley. I tried to drag him with me when the order came to fall back. He fought me off. He hit me with his rifle to make me let go of him. The stared at the scar. He wounded you while saving your life. Yes. That makes no sense. Smiled. It was a tired smile, full of memories and loss and something that might have been gratitude. No, he agreed. It does not, and that is exactly the point. He walked away, leaving the young delegate alone with questions that would take a lifetime to answer.